Hello, and welcome back to my workshop. I'm going to share a project with you that I'm working on. I am trying to resolve an issue with my layout plan and how it fits into this room. The original plan was for a room that I thought I had, which was a basic rectangle. The room I actually have has a small notch missing. And that notch is in the very first scene that I'm going to build. It's probably my favorite, most important scene on the layout. It's the car float scene at Port Annabelle. And this is important because it allows the layout to go into operation with an interchange to the outside world as soon as I start building. I don't need to wait to start running things. And I have to make some compromises to make it work. So this video is going to start with an explanation on what I have, what the realities of the situation are, and what I have to give up. And then I'll get into building the actual mock-up and figuring out physically exactly what I have to work with. So please enjoy, and thank you for stopping by. This drawing right here shows a basic idea of the track plan I had for my railroad. This is not an accurate scale drawing of a track plan. It just shows the main features of the layout and kind of where they're located in the train room. This part that I've outlined in red is the part of the car float scene where I have the problem. This is the corner that is causing all of the problems. It sticks out of the wall about 6 inches. I've framed it in with a 2x4 back there to make it about 1.5 inches shorter. Eventually I'll get to the part where I start building the layout, and I'll show you why I have those 2x4 frames there. They do serve a purpose. But this is causing a lot of problems because it's right at the point where the track comes off of the incline up to the staging yard, and there's really not a lot I can do and still keep the plan and operational sequence the same. So I'm just going to have to sacrifice a lot of the car float scene, or not really sacrifice it, I guess, but redesign it and make it into something different and functional. The upper left-hand portion of this picture shows the room the way that I thought it was. I thought it was an 11-foot by 22-foot rectangle. It is, in fact, very close to that. It's a little bit longer. It's about 11 by 24, I believe, is what the final measurement really was. I don't think it's quite 11. I think it's roughly 10 foot 8 at its widest. So 10 foot 8 by 24, I think, is what it came out to. But we have that 6-inch offset down at the bottom, and that causes two big problems. Number one, it moves the workbench 6 inches to the wall, which affects the turnaround, and I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with that. I'll approach that in years when I get to that point. But it also affects the car float scene. So you can see in the roughened the track plan on the bottom right compared to the actual room size at the bottom left, and there is a problem there. There is interference that will have to be approached. This rough sketch I made a long time ago shows my idea for the car float with the 3 tracks going straight across the apron, no turnouts, no frogs, nothing on the float or the apron. And it was going to run parallel to the wall. So when I built the original mock-up for the layout, as you can see in this picture, the car float does run parallel to the wall, and the car float is all the way against the backdrop. That was the way it was planned, that there was supposed to be no space in between the car float and the backdrop. The 2 buildings in the front were supposed to be industrial spots where I could spot cars, have some operational interest in front of it, have the switchback going to the engine service facility. So here I am in the room, and this is the actual spot that we're talking about. So this isn't theoretical. There's no more planning. There's no more guessing on what the room's going to look like. This is it. The first thing I have to deal with is the corner, and I have to hide that. And to hide that, I'm going to build a very large design preservation models modular wall building to go there, complete with the powerhouse windows. It's going to be huge. It's going to be obnoxious. It's probably going to be an eyesore. I did not want any brick buildings on this side of the layout. All the brick buildings were supposed to be on the other side of the layout in Centerville. It's about 14 inches tall, and I think a wooden building that big would just look preposterous, and I don't think I'd like it. The modular walls will be right up against the wall, so there's going to be very little loss of any real estate on the layout. I'm going to try to keep it so it doesn't protrude any more than 1/4 inch from the wall, because space here does become a premium. The seawall on the back of this portion is going to have to be at an angle because it just would look silly to have the car float at an angle and then just have a seawall up against the back. Without the car float touching the backdrop, there was really no choice but to add a seawall back there. And the seawall going straight while the car float was angled, I didn't think it would look right. So I decided I would angle the seawall. And then the 3 tracks on the car float are going to have to come in at an angle. There's not enough room to make them go straight because that would result in a very tight S-curve. So the tracks are going to come off the incline from staging. They're going to turn roughly about the equivalent of a number 5 turnout, and they're going to go out onto the car float. One bonus of having the seawall back there is it gives me a spot to put some small buildings, which is going to be fun to build. I've already built a couple of these small buildings. I'm going to incorporate those into the mock-up. I have an idea on how they're going to go, and I want to see what other small buildings I already have that will fit there. Unfortunately, in the front, I had planned to have 2 large buildings up there. One was going to be Walther's Front Street Warehouse, and the other building was going to be Weatherby's Fish and Tackle by Model Tech Studios. Unfortunately, both of those buildings are going to have to be eliminated. There's just not going to be any room for them on the layout. So I'm probably just going to have to sell those off. That was a plan that reality made impossible. This picture shows the pieces I'm going to use to build the base for my car float scene. I had to use 3 pieces of foam board to get it wide enough. I really wanted it to be 48 inches, but we could practically only make it 44 without buying another sheet. And at over $3 a sheet, I'm like, nope, I'm stopping at 5 sheets. So I made the pieces for this. I laid them out on the table, got everything all nice and square. And using my hot glue gun, I went ahead and started gluing the splice plates together on the bottom to make these 4 pieces into one. This glue gun I'm using is an antique. I bought it at an antique store, and it is one of the best glue guns I have ever used in my entire life. I don't know how old it is. I don't know when it was made, but if it ever breaks, I'm going to be very, very, very sad because I've been spoiled by this piece of equipment. I don't remember what I paid for it, but it couldn't have been more than $5. And it has just been great. I didn't even try it out. My wife was like, don't you want to know if it works or not? And I'm like, I'll gamble the money. And it has been truly a great tool to have. It will burn you. It gets much hotter than modern glue guns do. Gluing these pieces across the bottom, these are going to be the supports to hold it up. I don't like to have the foam board just sit on the bottom. And I'm going to glue 4 triangular support pieces to each one of these legs. And these will keep it from just falling over when any weight gets on it. If you don't reinforce these runners that you put on the bottom, they will just collapse and bend right over. It only takes a second to pop these triangle pieces out of a little scrap piece, and they do a tremendous amount for making it stronger. So don't skip this step. The reason I had to put the runners on is because they're actually not just the legs for the bottom. They're going to be the bracket for the backdrop. The backdrop supports are going to glue onto those pieces that stick out the back. Turned it over. It's nice and smooth. This is going to be fine. I'm using this level as a straight edge to establish the point that's going to be the seawall. And I'm gluing these 2-inch by 2-inch squares in back there, and the front of those will become the seawall. This 6-inch wide piece of foam board I have in front of me is representing the car float, and I'm now gluing some pieces in to the level which I positioned with the car float mock-up, and these 4 square pieces that are going to form the basis for the side of the car float. Here I have these flat pieces that I glued to the runners that are forming the uprights for the backdrop, and I'm gluing the backdrop in place. One of them doesn't have one of those flat pieces because that is where the splice joint is that holds the 2 pieces of the backdrop together, and there was already a piece there, so it doesn't have a second one glued onto the upright. And I set that in place and press it down, and it should be good. Put some weights on it to hold it. And then I take and run a bead of hot glue all the way across the bottom, just to discourage it from warping any. Now I'm going to glue the seawall into place, and that is being held at a right angle with these two Milwaukee small little pocket squares. And then to the backdrop, I am gluing little 2-inch by 2-inch pieces, and they form the supports for the back of the seawall top. And then using the glue gun to coat everything with glue, I take and press the top of the seawall into place. These 1-inch thick pieces form the sides of the car float. And I'm gluing them up to the guides that I previously installed, making sure the car float is where I measured it out and wanted it to be. I'm gluing in these dividers right here to the one piece that I know is straight because it was put up against the blocks that were set in place by the level. And since all these are the same length, I know that will make the other side of the car float parallel to the first side that I put on. And I'm using some clamps to hold the front piece in place. The very first part of it, I laid at a little bit of an angle. I used this square to line up the ends of the two pieces to make sure that they are even with one another. And then I go ahead and put the first part of the seawall in place, make sure it looks good. Start gluing the tops of the car float in place. The car float would actually be, of course, 3 separate pieces. There'd be the track on the ground, the apron itself that mates up to the car float, and then the car float. For this mock-up, I'm just going to represent the apron by drawing some lines on this one piece of foam core here. The foam core is just going to represent all 3 pieces at once. I'm not going to try to make a division between the car float and the apron for this mock-up. I'm just checking the size of everything to make sure it works. Gluing part of the front seawall in place. The front seawall is going to have a little bit of a convoluted shape to it. I'm going to try to model an industry that's not there. I still want to have spaces to put cars for industries out in the front. So I'm going to do the trick where you model the loading dock and the equipment out towards the port and just say that the building or the industry, whatever it serves, is in the aisle. For painting the water, I'm using a bare color sample that I had custom mixed at the Home Depot. These bare color samples are just incredible. I'm painting over black, and with just one coat and no primer, it covers in a nice even layer. This is so much better than trying to use craft paint for something like this. There's just as simple as can be, no going back over it, no futzing around. It's just done. For the sky, I have this color I custom mixed also at the Home Depot. I had this one done a long time ago. This I actually did use as a color sample to see if I liked the color for my backdrop. I did not like this color for my backdrop. It's got a bit of a gray to it and even kind of a yellow tint. And I'm glad I had a sample made before I painted the walls this color. I went with a different color for my sky. And it looks good when it's just there by itself, but when you put anything in front of it and compare it to it, you can see it's kind of yellow. And I've got a basic dark olive green that I'm going to use for the areas that are going to be ground. This is just to represent grass, I guess, but actually in this area is probably be a lot of gravel and sand and dirt, but I'm not going to do that. It's just a mock-up. I know that this area that's green is just ground. And I brush it on just like I do the rest of it. And again, one coat, perfectly smooth, no extra work, and I'm done. This is a nice medium equipment gray color. It's going to look good on the car float. So just open it up, and I'll slap some color on the car float, just like I did the other pieces. One thing to point out, I'm also using a very good brush. I'm using a Wooster Pro brush on these, or I'm using a Purdy brush. I have one of each. I can't tell them apart. But these are professional quality brushes. And with the bare professional quality paint and the professional quality brushes that I have, painting these mock-ups is just a simple, almost instantaneous endeavor. Using cheap paints is just frustrating. I have run into a big problem with this project at this point. The foam core board, which I have used on countless mock-ups, I have used foam core board for a long time. It developed a problem. I have always bought my foam core board for mock-ups from the least expensive source that I can find, and for decades that has been the Dollar Tree. Go to the Dollar Tree with $1 in your pocket, you get a piece of foam core board, bring it home, make your mock-up. Everything with it goes perfectly. I stopped by the Dollar Tree, and the Dollar Tree did not sell foam core boards anymore. They told me they hadn't had them in a while. So I went to the Walmart Supercenter, which I hate going to. Probably the first time I've been inside that Walmart Supercenter in more than a year. I went in there and I went back to the foam core board, and I went into sticker shock. Foam core board at Walmart is over $3 a sheet now, which is a tremendous increase from the $1 a sheet that I was paying for it just a few months ago. And I bought 5 sheets for this project, and I took it home. You saw me glue it all together. Everything's reinforced. Everything's fine. What you didn't see me do is I also painted the back side of it. I learned a long time ago when you're dealing with foam core board that it will warp if you only paint one side, so I always paint both sides of foam core board. I didn't bother showing any of that in the video because it would just be boring and silly. But the foam core board has started warping horribly, and not only did it warp, but in a lot of places the paper peeled away from the foam core. So the foam core was actually splitting. In other places, the warp was so severe and so strong, it actually broke the hot glue joints. So I have to come up with a way to fix this. You'll see me do this in the next part of the video. The fixes I made improved a little bit, but there's still some serious warpage problems on the mock-up. I just have to keep reminding myself it's just a mock-up. It's only going to be here for a little while, and then it's going to the landfill. So if it's not perfect, don't sweat it. I'm going to try not to sweat it, and let's continue with the build. Before I address the problems with the warping, I'm going to go ahead and finish up all the rest of the pieces that have to go onto this mock-up. I have gone away from foam core now. For the last few pieces, I'm just using 50 thousandths inch thick chipboard. I hope it doesn't warp. I've used this on mock-ups, and I've used this to build false interiors for buildings. I've used this to build roofs, all kinds of things. I've never had a problem with this material warping. It isn't suitable for large flat areas like the base or the backdrop or probably even the car float. But for these little pieces I have left, I think it's going to work just fine. This little cutout I made here in the front, this is where water passes through to go to the area where the mill is going to be. I sure hope I still have space for the mill. That's going to be built from the J&J Tool Company and use a fine scale miniatures water wheel that a friend of mine gave me. So I hope that is definitely going to still be doable. The more I look at this mock-up, I don't think I'm going to have space for the Rocky Point Lighthouse from Branch Line Laser Kit. And that's a little bit disappointing also. These pieces here in the front are just the dock for the industry that isn't there. Hopefully I'll have room for 2 tracks on here, a loading dock, a crane, make it look like there's some unloading or loading of small boats going on, loading and unloading of train cars, and an indescript industry that isn't there, so I'll be able to spot any kind of car I want to. That's the end of all the pieces. Now I'm dealing with the warp. The first one is this raised up section here in the middle of the boat where the 2 pieces of the deck just sort of lifted up and came apart. And I was amazed how strong the warp in this was. It took all my 1, 2, 3 blocks and the 1954 bound edition of Model Railroader to flatten it out. And I let it dry for a long time, or harden or cool or whatever hot glue does. And I pulled it off and it was fine. And look at how much the front of this is lipped up. So I went ahead and just pumped it full of hot glue. And I put too much hot glue in, and there's several spots in the front where the hot glue dripped off the front of it and ran down onto the water surface. And again, it's just a mock-up. I don't need to fret this. The damage there in the front doesn't matter. It's all going to the landfill. I would like it to be flat and not warped while I work on it, though, so this is kind of important. And at this point, it looks good, but unfortunately, since I did this, the seam on the center of the car float came apart again, and you'll see that in some of the pictures at the end. And this is the backdrop. This is where some of the foam core came loose from itself, and some of the foam core came loose from the hot glue, and
the absolute tenacity of this stuff to warp, I've never seen anything like it. Like I said, I've used foam core many, many, many times. I've never dealt with an issue like this, and especially never dealt with an issue like this where I painted both sides of the foam board. So something very strange going on. I'm never using foam core board again for any purpose like this. And for the cost I spent on this foam core right here, I could have actually bought foam insulation and done this. And I probably would have been a better idea to make the base out of just foam insulation and then go ahead and build the buildings from chipboard. Here in the front, I am now building the concrete portion of the seawall, and I'm just gluing some small pieces of foam, not foam core, but these are chipboard in there just to represent the ribs in the concrete. And for the part that's got corrugated iron, I'm going to use this piece of terrain right here that I had for wargaming. It's just corrugated cardboard with sawdust glued to it. And I'm not going to use it for wargaming anymore, so I'm just going to cut it up into strips, and I'm going to glue it on the front right here. And it does a fantastic job of representing corrugated iron seawall. This may wind up being the way I model the seawall. It looks really good, a whole lot better than I thought it would. And I'm using the 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold the seams in place while the white glue that's holding it down gets to dry. Had a little bit of trouble here just getting the last portion to line up, and I have no idea what's going on with my camera right here. But every time I move, the camera tries to focus on something else. I'm sorry about that. That's the first time that's happened in any video I recorded. Unfortunately, when you're recording these build videos, you only get one take because you can't go and take it apart and redo it again. So I apologize for that. That's incredibly annoying. Hope that's not something the camera's developing. For the concrete portion of the seawall, I'm just using a light beige color. It really doesn't look much like concrete, but I couldn't find one in my color sample selection that I already had that looked better, and I wasn't going to spend $7 to have another color sample made. And going ahead and painting the green, the portions of the flat part right here that should be green. It's just the ground area. Using a much smaller brush this time. I'm trying to be more careful. I don't want to splatter any of that onto the water surface. And where I made that cutout, I painted it blue. And now I'm just going to take the sponge and I'm going to dab on highlights onto the grass, a little bit lighter green color, and I'm going to highlight waves onto the water just to break it up, make it look a little better, make it look kind of three-dimensional. Dabbing things with a sponge like this is a great way to add texture to any smooth surface. And it's incredible the difference it makes. That water looks so much better just having that done. And I think this mock-up is done, and I'm ready to put it to use. Well, that's the end of the build of the mock-up. The mock-up is now sitting in the exact spot in the workshop where that part of the layout is going to be built, I hope, eventually. It will be the first part of the layout that I do build, so I'm pretty sure that part will get done. The purpose of the mock-up is to determine what buildings look good over there on that part of the seawall, because I hadn't really intended to build a waterfront scene with a bunch of small buildings. Now I'm going to. I've got 2 done already. I set them in place, and they just look incredible. I'm now really excited about this scene. So I cut out cardboard silhouettes of the footprints of other small buildings that I had and laid them around and figured out what would fit where. So I'm going to have some more Craftsman Kit build videos coming up soon as I populate the rest of this mock-up. And I'll keep adding things to it as long as it doesn't warp itself apart and break into a million pieces. But it's already pretty well served its purpose. I can see that this part of the layout's going to look pretty good. I will still be able to have my 2 tracks there that let me stage some cars up in front. The industry's gone. It's a make-believe industry in the aisle now. That's okay. I'm not going to have any tracks running back on the seawall. The seawall's purely decoration now. I've got enough room for some of these small boats to get posed here and there. I've collected quite a few small boats when I thought I was going to have a little bit different waterfront scene with the car float all the way in the back. Still looks like it will work. I also have my canal scene that will be on the layout about 15 feet away from this one, so I've got some other spaces for some boats.
And I'm pretty excited about this whole thing. It's looking good. This was time well spent. The mock-up's probably going to be in place for probably a year. I don't know how long it's going to take me to build all these buildings. I don't think I'm going to start building the layout until I've got some buildings done and I can start populating this part of the layout pretty quick. I've got some other things to take care of too. I'm building models now. I'm having a blast. I don't need to start working on the layout right away. It's good to have my workshop going. I'm glad you stopped by to see what's going on, and please like and subscribe and come back to my workshop again. Thank you.